Okay, so down in Australia, scientists are using this incredible new tool to save some of the country's most endangered native rodents. And get this, it's not some high-tech tracking collar or a fancy drone. It's a single drop of blood. They're literally creating a health blueprint from these microscopic clues, and it is completely changing the game for their survival. So let's dive in and see exactly how they're pulling this off.
You know, this whole thing really boils down to one huge question. How do you save an animal when its most basic biology is a complete mystery? That's the exact problem conservationists are up against with a lot of Australia's native rodents. It's this frantic race against time, but they're starting with almost no information.
So, first things first, let's get a handle on just how big this problem is. When most of us hear the word rodent, we probably think of pests, right? But Australia is home to dozens of native species that are just as unique as a kangaroo or a koala. And just like those iconic mammals, a lot of them are in big trouble. And the crazy part is, we know next to nothing about them.
And we're not just talking about one or two species here. Look at this list. You've got critically endangered rock rats, the vulnerable greater stick nest rat. They're all facing threats from habitat loss, from predators, from fires. But the real kicker, the biggest roadblock for the people trying to save them, is right there at the bottom. Their fundamental biology is a mystery. We literally don't even have a clear picture of what a healthy one is supposed to look like.
So how do you solve a mystery like this? Well, this is where the science gets really clever. Researchers turn to the study of blood. I mean, think about it. When you go to the doctor, what's one of the first things they do? They take a blood sample to get a snapshot of your health. Conservation scientists realized they needed to do the exact same thing. But first, they had to figure out what normal even looks like for these little guys.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? For us, for humans, doctors have mountains of data. They know the exact normal range for cholesterol, for white blood cells, for everything. They can spot a problem in a second. But for a greater stick nest rat, before this research, it was just a wall of question marks. A vet couldn't tell if a reading was a sign of serious disease or just a normal Tuesday for that particular animal.
So as scientists started gathering this data, they realized they weren't just, filling in spreadsheets. They were basically becoming animal detectives. Because as they looked closer, the numbers in the blood started telling these incredible stories. Secrets about how these animals live, how they cope with stress, and how they've adapted to some of the toughest environments on Earth.
All right, so clue number one. The first big thing they found was a hidden signal, kind of like a fingerprint of stress, that was left behind in the white blood cells. And it revealed exactly how the animals were reacting to the very process of being studied.
Okay, so the researchers looked at something called the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio. Don't worry, it's simpler than it sounds. Basically, neutrophils are the body's first responder cells for stress, while lymphocytes are more for long-term immunity. Now, in your typical lab mouse, you'd see more lymphocytes, but in the stick nest rats they studied, these stress-related neutrophils were more than twice as common. This wasn't a sign of sickness, it was a clear biological footprint of the stress from being captured and handled, an absolutely vital piece of info for anyone managing these animals.
Okay, so that was the stress clue. But the second clue they uncovered, honestly, it was even more mind-blowing. This one didn't point to stress. It pointed to an incredible, almost superpower-like adaptation for survival, and it was hidden right there in the blood chemistry of the species that live out in the desert.
What scientists found was that desert species, like the plains rat, had really low levels of something called creatinine. Now, in a person, that might be a bad sign. It can mean muscle problems. But in these rodents, it was a clue to their superpower. It pointed to, as this study puts it, special adaptive strategies to exist in dry conditions. Turns out, these animals have ridiculously efficient kidneys that squeeze out and conserve every single drop of water. And that unique blood chemistry is a direct sign of their amazing evolutionary gift.
But I have to tell you, getting all these clues, it was not easy. Not by a long shot. This isn't your clean, straightforward lab work with thousands of mice. These researchers were doing science on the absolute edge, where every single blood sample was precious and incredibly hard to get.
I mean, the hurdles they faced were just immense. Because these animals are critically endangered, you can't just go out and grab them. Access is super restricted. Can you believe that? Some of these groundbreaking studies were based on as few as 4 individual animals. Samples often had to be taken opportunistically, which means maybe the only animal you can get a sample from is an older one, whose blood might not represent a healthy adult. It is an incredibly difficult puzzle to piece together.
Okay, so you've got all these challenges, these tiny, hard-won clues. How in the world do you turn that into something that can actually save an animal? Well,
That's the final, and honestly, the most important part of this whole story. It's all about turning that messy data into a practical blueprint for action.
All those scattered data points come together to create what's called baseline health data. And you can think of it as the official instruction manual for a species' health. It's the cheat sheet. For the very first time, vets working in captive breeding programs can look at a blood test and actually know if an animal is healthy or not. Biologists in the field can check wild populations for signs of stress from the environment. This blueprint makes it possible to make smart, life-saving decisions that were completely impossible just a few years ago.
So all of this really leaves you with a bigger thought, doesn't it? The story of these Australian rodents shows how clues that are completely invisible to the naked eye can hold the entire key to survival. It really makes you wonder, what other hidden biological secrets are just waiting out there for us to discover? Secrets that could help us protect the planet's most vulnerable wildlife.